If you were an environmental group whose purpose was to protect landscape values, what would you be most concerned about? This or this? I agree that wind farms can spoil the character of a landscape, but their impact is tiny by comparison to an open-cast coal mine, which in the UK can be 600 feet deep and 2 miles across. But something very odd has been happening. Britain's foremost landscape conservation group, the Campaign to Protect Rural England, has been waging wars against wind farms all over the country. But I was unable to find a single instance over the past 5 years of a campaign by CPRE against open-cast coal mining. This mystified me, so I decided to talk to the Chief Executive, Shaun Spiers. What is the CPRE's position on wind farms?
We think wind farms have a place in a mix of providing more renewable energy, but we think they should be in the right place, delivered within the planning system and take account of landscape character.
How many wind farms has CPRE opposed over the past few years?
I don't have figures on that.
I've heard a figure of around 50% of all wind farm applications. Is that correct?
I wouldn't know. I think it's probably true that we've supported fewer than 50%. In fact, we're more likely not to oppose than actually actively to support.
CPRE Cornwall has launched a national petition, lodged with 10 Downing Street, calling on the government to stop promoting wind farms both onshore and offshore. It also calls for coal to be used to make oil, which is perhaps the most carbon-intensive activity known to mankind. Does this qualify for a response from National Office?
Yes, that's. I didn't want to. Your researchers. Well, I kind of thought you might have picked that one up. Yes, I've had words with CPRE Cornwall. That's out of line with our national policy. Frankly, until you picked it up, it's had 124 signatures on the Number 10 website.
But the petition is still online.
Yes, and I wish it wasn't.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, I will carry on talking to CPRE Cornwall and saying that we think it's unhelpful.
You've asked them to take it down?
I've said it's unhelpful.
And they've refused to take it down?
They haven't actually refused to take it down. We're in discussions with them at the moment, and I've got meetings coming up with them about it.
But this is becoming quite a big issue for you now, isn't it?
It's becoming quite a big issue now you picked it up, George, but with 124 signatures and hardly anybody having seen it, actually it's a bit of a trivial issue.
No,
what we're trying to do
is that it's not just CPRE Cornwall. There are plenty of local groups who have been making highly misleading statements about wind, local CPRE groups.
I'm aware of a couple.
Well, I've got quite a long list here of groups which are claiming, for instance, that wind turbines only turn 30% of the time. You and I know that's completely wrong. Claiming that there's a very expensive way of producing electricity. You and I know that's completely wrong. Claiming all sorts of things which are plainly wrong in your name, in CPRE's name.
But George, this is a debate. I think Green Guardian readers like you and me can live in a bit of a bubble. If you get your news from, say, the Sunday Telegraph or the Spectator, then it's taken as read that a lot of this is nonsense. These things don't work. And what I don't, my previous career was in the Labour Party. What I don't want to do is start imposing kind of central lines and get bell, book and candle against dissent when there's a debate going on within CPRE, which actually needs to be brought out into the open. Sure. And it's harder to bring it out in the open if you start pointing the fingers and say, close that down, that debate, that person's out of line.
So, in general, CPRE will oppose energy schemes which have a severe effect on the landscape. That's basically the policy.
Yes, but what is a severe effect on the landscape? What we don't have is anything like a consensus on how to weigh the costs and benefits of different environmental schemes. But of course, there's a large element of subjectivity in this.
In that case, how do you explain the fact that I've been unable to find a single instance of a campaign in the past 5 years against open-cast coal mining?
Because we don't campaign on everything.
But you're not campaigning at all on open-cast coal mining.
But we're a small NGO, and what do you want us to do? To campaign on every single issue?
This is by far the biggest landscape impact of any energy scheme in the UK at the moment, much, much bigger than wind. There are 22 new open-cast coal mines which have been approved since January 2007. There are another 22 in the planning pipeline. There are dozens more about to go forward for planning, and not a single campaign by any branch of CPRE against any of them. Why?
Why is because we are a small, struggling charity that has to focus on a huge plethora of threats, and you have to work out where you can have the most impact. And the thing that we've focused on overwhelmingly in the last few years has been housing and planning.
But as we've already established, you've also focused again and again on wind. Why have your branches focused on wind and not on opencast coal mining? I mean, there's no comparison, is there? It's a massive scar on the landscape, far bigger than a few wind turbines on a hill, and yet total silence.
Okay, well maybe they should, and maybe there's a role for national CPRE to say this, but when you talk about our branches, what you're talking about on the whole is very hard-pressed volunteers, and frankly there are more problems for them to face than there are volunteers to address them.
There's another explanation, isn't there? That not many of your members live in redundant former mining villages. You are predominantly a middle-class organisation. Wind turbines are a middle-class concern, but opencast coal mining isn't, because middle-class people don't tend to live in those places.
Well, we really trying quite hard to change the mix of CPRE. It'd be stupid of me not to say that we are on the whole a middle-class organisation, but it's a bit difficult to say to volunteers who are giving up a lot of their lives to do good, you're too middle class, you're too white. They're kind of quite busy, and a lot of them are really quite heroic in the efforts they put in to protect the countryside.
But you can see how this looks, can't you? I mean, if you are facing an opencast mining scheme on your doorstep and you're getting absolutely no support.
But have you got any evidence of those people coming to us for help?
So have you got any evidence of your people coming forward and saying opencast mining is an appalling blot on the landscape and something should be done about it?
No, I haven't got that evidence, but I've got lots of evidence of people ringing CPRE branches and getting support. Now, I'm sorry if people who are campaigning against opencast coal mining don't know that they can come to CPREs for support, but I've got no evidence of us saying, not interested in that, it's an ex-mining area, lump it. If you had evidence of that, I'd be very concerned.
But you see the thrust of the interview. What appears to have happened here is, in terms of energy generation in this country, CPRE objectively is becoming an anti-environmental organisation. It's fighting renewable energy schemes and not fighting fossil fuel schemes.
No, I think that is absolute rubbish. I think if you look at the work we're doing on transport, look at the work we're doing on aviation, look at the work we're doing on housing and planning.
In terms of energy generation.
Well, in terms of energy, in terms of general environmental use of energy and emission of carbon,
in terms
we
of
are absolutely
energy
in
generation,
the front line.
In terms of energy generation, you've become an anti-environmental organisation.
Well, I don't accept that. As I say, we're supporting some hydropower, we're promoting microgeneration and our vision for the countryside in the future, but we can't do everything.
But will you try to amend your policy now in the light of what we've been discussing in terms of opencast coal mining? Will you make it a CPRE priority?
Well, I have people telling me every day that we should what our priorities should be, and I have people every day telling me we've got to focus more because we're getting all burnt out and we're trying to do too much and spreading ourselves too thin.
But what about opencast coal
What I would go
mining?
back and see is who else is doing it, and whether there's a particular niche for CPRE to be doing it. So, thank you for alerting me to something which we haven't been working on, perhaps should have been, but I'll look at it.
Shaun, thanks very much.